Have you ever wondered if your body has been trying to talk to you all along, not with pain or dramatic symptoms, but with subtle, almost invisible nudges? What if the warning signs for how long you'll live after 70 aren't loud? They're quiet, ordinary moments you've brushed off. Let me ask you something. Do you sometimes feel a little unsteady when you get dressed? Do your hands feel weaker opening jars than they did last year? Are you sleeping less deeply, waking up more often, or just not hungry like you used to be? Most people shrug it off and say, that's just age. But what if those little changes aren't just random? What if they're silent messages from your body about what's coming next? Let me tell you about Harold, a man who thought he was doing just fine. At 76, he still lived on his own, did his own grocery shopping, and prided himself on being independent. But then, one morning, he slipped while reaching for a coffee mug. No major injury, just a bruise. But that bruise became a turning point, because when Harold looked back, he realized something. His body had been whispering to him for years. The small signs were there. He just didn't know how to hear them. And that's why you're here. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn 7 subtle but powerful signs your body may be giving you. Signs that, according to science, can predict not just your health, but how many good years you may have ahead. Because when it comes to aging well, the real question is not how long you've lived, but how well you've been listening. Harold James is 76 years old. He lives alone in a modest, sunlit house just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. To anyone who meets him, he looks like a man who has aged well. He walks without a cane, still drives, keeps up his lawn, and makes a mean pot of chili every Sunday. But what most people don't know is that Harold has spent the last 2 years quietly rebuilding himself. Not with pills or surgeries, but with small, consistent changes that started after one scary moment. Harold didn't grow up healthy. His early years were spent in a mining town, long workdays, cheap food, little rest. By the time he turned 60, he'd had 3 bouts of pneumonia, high blood pressure, and was beginning to feel like his energy was permanently draining. He accepted that aging meant slowing down. That is, until the morning he fell in his kitchen. He was reaching for a mug on the top shelf, lost his balance for a second. His left leg just didn't respond the way it used to. He tumbled sideways, hitting the counter before landing on the floor, no broken bones. But that fall shattered something else, his belief that he was doing fine. After a visit to the doctor and a long conversation with his daughter, Harold decided to start tracking everything. How he moved, how he slept, how strong his hands felt, even how often he laughed. He began reading research, watching interviews with centenarians, and noting the common traits of people who aged not just longer but better. What he discovered shocked him. It wasn't luck, money, or even genetics that predicted healthy aging. It was something else. A series of small signals, often overlooked, that told the real story. And once Harold learned to recognize those signals, he began to change the way he lived. Now he shares these lessons with others. Because Harold believes something powerful. If you can recognize the signs early, you can rewrite what aging looks like and feels like for you. It was a Tuesday morning, cold outside, grey sky. Harold had just made his usual breakfast, white toast with margarine, a few slices of bacon, black coffee. When it happened, he stood up from the table and felt dizzy. Not the kind of dizzy that passes after a deep breath. This was different. His legs felt unsteady. His heart raced, and for a moment his vision blurred. He reached for the wall, sat back down, waited, and that's when the thought came, what if I'm not okay? This wasn't the first time he'd felt it. Over the past year, little things had been creeping in. He'd stopped taking evening walks, grocery bags felt heavier. He forgot names more often. Sometimes he'd sleep 9 hours and still wake up exhausted, but Harold, like many men his age, brushed it off. Normal aging, the doctor had said, nothing serious. But on that cold Tuesday morning, something clicked. He realized he wasn't scared of dying. He was scared of slowly becoming someone else, someone weaker, slower, more dependent. Later that afternoon, while resting on the couch, Harold opened his laptop and searched early signs of aging decline. One article led to another, then to scientific studies, TED Talks, stories of people in their 90s still running marathons or playing piano. What was their secret? He took notes. Patterns began to emerge. It wasn't about massive lifestyle overhauls or expensive treatments. It was about catching the signals early. Signals like struggling to stand on one leg for more than a few seconds, losing interest in food or eating less without realizing it, finding it harder to remember directions or tasks, waking up tired despite a full night's sleep, avoiding social events due to low energy or anxiety, having difficulty opening jars or carrying bags, feeling not quite yourself, but not knowing why, each one seemingly small on its own, but together? A message. A gentle knock at the door from his body saying, "We need your help." That night, Harold took out a notebook and made 2 columns. Left side, signs he noticed in himself. Right side, habits he could start the next day. He didn't make a list of goals, he made a list of repairs, not extreme fixes, just gentle nudges in the right direction, the kind of changes someone could actually stick with. He started slow. First he practiced standing on one foot while brushing his teeth. Just 10 seconds. Then he began doing a short breathing exercise before bed. A week later he added light stretching in the mornings. No gym, no pressure, just presence. Harold didn't expect instant results, but something unexpected happened. Within 2 weeks he slept better. He didn't wake up in the middle of the night with that tightness in his chest. He had more clarity, a little more confidence when walking downstairs. His daughter noticed he seemed lighter. But most importantly, Harold felt hopeful again, not because he believed he could live forever, but because he finally felt like he could steer the ship again. That moment on the kitchen floor had been a warning, but it was also an invitation to see aging not as a decline, but as a dialogue. Your body speaks. The question is, are you listening? And Harold was. He was listening now more than ever, because for the first time in a long while he wasn't waiting to get worse. He was learning how to get better. Harold didn't just want to feel better. He wanted to know why he had felt off in the first place. So he dove deep. He didn't want guesses, he wanted clues, indicators. And that's when he discovered something surprising. Science had already mapped out many of the early signals the body sends as it begins to shift after 70. They're subtle, quiet, but they matter. Harold made a list. He called it the 7 signals. He wrote each one down with a question beside it, a kind of self-check. Not to judge himself, but to track where he stood. You can do the same. Here's what he learned. 1. Can I stand on one leg for 10 seconds? This one was strange at first. Balance seemed like a small thing. But the research was clear. The ability to stand on one leg without wobbling is one of the strongest predictors of long-term survival after 70. Why? Because it involves muscle strength, coordination, focus, and neurological stability, all in one simple test. Harold tried it that morning. He lasted 6 seconds before reaching for the wall, but instead of feeling discouraged, he made it a goal. Within 3 weeks, he hit 12 seconds. 2. How strong is my grip? This surprised him. Your handshake, it turns out, is more than a formality. Grip strength is one of the clearest reflections of muscle mass, nerve health, and even heart health. Harold picked up a small stress ball he found in a drawer and started using it every evening while watching TV. Then light dumbbells. He paid attention to whether jars felt heavier or if carrying groceries became harder, because grip isn't just about your hands, it's about your resilience. 3. How fast do I walk? Walking speed is often called the 6th vital sign in aging research. The slower you move, the more likely your systems, cardiovascular, muscular, and even cognitive, are slowing too. Harold timed his usual loop around the block. 4 minutes. The next week it was 3 minutes and 45 seconds. No racing, no pushing, just awareness. He reminded himself, you're not walking to finish. You're walking to stay ready. 4. How do I sleep? This one was harder to answer. Sleep had always been elusive, but Harold realized it wasn't just about hours. It was about quality. He started tracking how often he woke up, how often he felt groggy in the morning, and how refreshed he felt after a full night's rest. He made small adjustments. No screens after 8 p.m. He swapped his evening coffee for chamomile tea, and slowly the fog lifted. He wasn't dragging into the day anymore. 5. Am I still enjoying food? Appetite changes with age, but a shrinking appetite, especially if you're losing weight without trying, can signal more than just aging. Harold looked back and noticed something. His dinners had gotten smaller, not because he was full, but because he wasn't hungry. That week he committed to colourful meals. Protein with every breakfast, a variety of flavours. He even started preparing meals ahead of time to make eating more intentional. He paid attention to joy, not just calories, because losing interest in food was one of the first things that led his brother to rapid decline. He didn't want to follow that path. 6. How do I handle stress? This one made him pause. Stress had always been part of life. Bills, family, politics. But Harold now saw how deeply it was tied to aging. Chronic stress increases inflammation. And inflammation? It accelerates everything. Memory loss, joint pain, even heart disease. So he asked himself, when something bad happens, do I carry it with me, or do I breathe through it? He started small. A 4-7-8 breathing pattern when frustrated. A short gratitude note before bed. Not to eliminate stress, but to process it. 7. Am I still connected? Harold looked around his quiet house. He hadn't spoken to his neighbour in weeks. His daughter called, but not often. He'd stopped going to book club after COVID. And slowly, that isolation had become normal. But isolation isn't just loneliness, it's risk. Studies show that lack of meaningful connection increases mortality risk as much as smoking or obesity. Harold made one call that evening, just one. The next day he called someone else, joined a local discussion group, reached out to an old friend from high school. That spark of connection changed everything, not overnight, but it shifted the course. The 7 signs weren't about fear, they were a map, a way to see yourself clearly. Harold didn't ace every one of them, but he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to notice, respond, rebuild, and now he was. Once Harold saw the signs, he didn't panic. He planned. He understood something that took most people a lifetime to realize. Aging isn't an emergency. It's a series of quiet decisions. And he decided that instead of trying to fix everything, he'd shift the foundation. Not hacks, not pills, not fads. Just 5 simple rules. He called them his rebuilding rules, not because he was broken, but because he deserved to be strong again. Here they are. Rule 1. Begin every day with your nervous system. Harold used to start his mornings with noise, the news, the phone, the jolt of coffee. But now he began with breath. Before he stood up, before his feet hit the floor, he gave himself 3 minutes. He would close his eyes and take 10 slow breaths. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds. Pause for a moment. Exhale through the mouth for 6 seconds. No apps, no music, just stillness. This small reset changed everything. It told his body, you are safe, you are ready. It calmed his heart rate, smoothed his thoughts, gave him space before the world made demands. It was simple, but it worked. Because the nervous system doesn't need much. It just needs attention. Rule 2. Feed the body before it asks. At 88, Harold didn't wait to feel hungry anymore. He didn't wait to feel weak, or foggy, or low. Instead, he built a routine, a breakfast that built him. Every morning, without fail, he made what he called the core plate. 1 boiled egg, a slice of whole grain toast with avocado, a small bowl of berries, a handful of walnuts, herbal tea with a splash of oat milk. This wasn't fancy, but it was powerful. Protein for his muscles, healthy fats for his joints, antioxidants for his brain, and hydration to start the engine. He noticed his mornings got steadier, his thinking clearer, his energy more even. What changed? Not what he ate when he ate. He gave his body what it needed before it cried out, and his body thanked him for it. Rule 3. Move like you plan to stay. Some people exercise to lose weight, others to look good. Harold moved because he wanted to stay here longer, but not with strain, with presence. Every morning after breakfast he went outside. Sometimes it was a walk to the corner, sometimes just pacing the porch. He called it his commitment to movement. He never timed it, never tracked his steps, but he moved. Every day. Why? Because motion is medicine, and stillness is decay. His rule was simple. If you can move, you must. Not because it's easy, because it's your right. Rule 4. Protect the night like it's sacred. Most people think sleep is the end of the day. Harold thought of it as preparation for the next, so he stopped using screens after dinner. Ate early and light, dimmed the lights by 8 p.m, and the biggest shift, he made a nighttime promise. No news, no worries, no planning tomorrow. He let the night be rest. He took a warm shower, wrote down one good moment from the day, did a short breathing exercise. Then he lay back and pictured the version of himself he wanted to wake up as: calm, clear, upright. Over time he slept deeper, woke up earlier, and no longer needed naps, because real healing begins in silence. And sleep is the deepest silence of all. Rule 5. Connect every day, even briefly. Harold used to believe connection meant big gestures, parties, family reunions. Now he knew better. One call, one wave to a neighbour, one question to a cashier. That was enough. Every day he made contact, because isolation wasn't just lonely, it was dangerous. He kept a connection list on his fridge, names of 10 people he hadn't talked to in a while. Every week he picked one and reached out. The result? His heart felt lighter. His mind felt sharper. His days felt shared, even if just for 5 minutes. Connection wasn't optional, it was vital. Those were Harold's 5 rebuilding rules. They didn't require money or youth or perfect health. They required intention, and over time they rebuilt more than his strength. They rebuilt his trust in himself. Because when you stop chasing miracles and start listening to your own rhythms, something beautiful happens. You return to yourself. And at 88, Harold had finally done just that. Harold didn't become a new man overnight. He didn't wake up one day with energy, purpose and strength. But over time, the small things added up. One morning, as he laced up his walking shoes, he caught his reflection in the window. And something stopped him. It wasn't what he saw, it was what he felt. He felt stable, he felt grounded, he felt ready. This was his new normal, not a return to youth, not a fantasy version of aging, just a steady, solid life, one decision at a time. He could rely on his body again. Harold didn't run marathons, but he could climb stairs without pain. He didn't lift weights, but he carried his own groceries. He didn't fear the shower floor anymore. He could reach for a pot on the top shelf, crouch to pick up a dropped key, and walk 5 blocks to the library, unassisted. His knees still made a sound or two. His back reminded him of its presence on rainy mornings, but he trusted his body now. It was no longer a stranger or a threat. It was his ally again. His mind became a companion, not a chatterbox. At one point, Harold's thoughts used to race. Worries about money, regrets from the past, dread about what might come. But after weeks of intentional breathwork, simple movement and nightly visualization, something shifted. The noise quieted. Now, when a stressful thought arose, he didn't chase it. He breathed through it. He gave it space, then let it move on. His memory sharpened too. He could recall names, events, directions, not perfectly, but clearly enough to hold a story, finish a thought, offer a tip to a younger neighbour. He no longer feared losing his mind because he was using it every day. He felt useful again. One of the most surprising results, people started asking Harold for advice again. The young woman at the market who wanted to learn how to grow tomatoes in pots. The neighbour's teenage grandson who needed help changing a flat bike tyre. A friend from church who wanted to know what was in that weird onion drink he kept mentioning. Harold had something to offer again. Not just memories, but wisdom. Not just lessons, but living proof. He wasn't the old man next door. He was the man who rode his bike on Sundays, who always smiled at the mailman, who waved to kids walking to school. His life became visible again. He wasn't afraid of mornings anymore. Aging had made mornings hard for Harold once. The stiffness, the heaviness, the fog. But now he woke up differently. He didn't rush, he didn't dread. He greeted the day with presence. First his breath, then the warm tonic, a few stretches, a step onto the porch, a hello to the sky. This ritual didn't just start his day. It gave his day shape. The body doesn't need surprises, it needs rhythm. And Harold had finally found his. He stopped waiting for permission. Perhaps the biggest shift wasn't physical, it was the disappearance of apology. Harold stopped apologizing for slowing down, for needing rest, for choosing tea instead of coffee, for prioritizing peace over productivity. He stopped trying to prove himself and started honouring himself. That confidence changed how people saw him, but more importantly, how he saw himself. Because aging isn't the problem, disconnection is. Harold had reconnected with his breath, his body, his mornings, his people. He didn't go back in time. He stepped forward with intention. This was Harold's new normal. No miracle transformations, no magical solutions, just consistency, self-respect, and a quiet revolution of daily care. And when people asked him, "How did you change your life at this age?" he always smiled and said, "I didn't change everything, I just stopped abandoning myself." And maybe that's where real health begins. Harold didn't write a book. He didn't become a motivational speaker, a health coach, or a YouTube sensation. He just lived, quietly, clearly, fully. But if he could sit with you now, maybe across a kitchen table, maybe on a bench in the park, he'd tell you something he wished someone had told him earlier. And it wouldn't be complicated. It would sound something like this: "It's not too late, but it won't happen by accident." You don't drift into a better body, a clearer mind, a deeper breath. You build it, not in leaps, not in sprints, but in quiet daily pacts with yourself. I'll breathe, I'll move, I'll care, I'll keep going. That's it, that's everything. Your future depends more on your rhythm than your age. People think aging is decline, but decline is often just disconnection from the body, from movement, from breath, from meaning. When you reconnect, not to your past, but to your presence, something surprising happens. You don't just stop slipping, you start rising, slowly, surely, on your own terms. Small discomforts are often your body's way of whispering, "Help me before I scream." That stiffness in your knees, that shallow breath, that forgetful fog. They're not betrayals, they're requests. Your body isn't trying to punish you. It's asking for attention, for kindness, for consistency. Ignore it and it will yell, but listen early and it will thank you every day. You're allowed to feel good, even now. There's a myth that life after 70 should be all about compromise, that aches are normal, that slowing down is fate, that foggy minds and fragile bones are a package deal. But that's not the whole story. You are still allowed to feel strong in your spine, steady in your breath, clear in your mind, calm in your mornings, and loved in your connections. That doesn't disappear with birthdays, it just needs a little more intention to stay alive. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're becoming. Harold didn't start his health habits in his 30s or 40s or even his 50s. He started at 63 after a fall, after the doctor said pre-everything, after the mirror didn't look like him anymore. But that moment didn't define him. What defined him was the breath he took the next morning, the stretch he did before standing, the tea he sipped instead of coffee, the light he stood in for 7 minutes before breakfast, the walk, the meal, the pause, the ritual, the rhythm, the respect. You're not too late. You're right on time to begin. Your health doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for partnership. You don't need to overhaul your life. You need to be on your own side. Treat your body like a friend, not a burden. Speak gently to your mind, not harshly. Offer consistency, not punishment. The body listens when you lead with care, and when you give it the smallest signal, "I'm here, I care," it starts to come back to you, one cell at a time, one breath at a time. So what would Harold say? He wouldn't sell you a program. He wouldn't hand you a checklist. He'd look at you and say, "Pick one thing, just one, and do it like your life depends on it," because it does, but not in the way you think. Not in the dramatic emergency room sense, in the daily aliveness sense, in the ability to feel like yourself again. You don't need more time. You need more meaning in your time. That's what Harold discovered. That meaning wasn't in milestones. It was in mornings, the quiet ones, the intentional ones, the ones where your body gets a chance, where your breath feels like a gift, where your day doesn't begin with noise but with you. So if you're over 70 or 60 or 80 and you're asking, "Is there still time to feel like myself again?" Harold would smile and say, "There's only one way to find out. Start today."